Are you also tired of playing against Cad Bane every single time and losing nonstop? Yeah, me too, Archie. Let's find out how to beat him. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Dinozor Gaming, where we learn to be a better player. Today we are doing an episode of Break the Meta, the series in which we talk about the strongest decks out there and how you can either tech or strategize against them to come out on top. Now this episode is going to be about Ashes of the Empire. I know the set's not out quite yet, but with Galactus right around the corner, and I mean the set almost here, there's a lot of people practicing, training, discussing online about what the best decks are. And so you kind of need to be prepared, whether you just want to prepare for your early stage PQs, or you want to get ready for Vegas, or maybe you just want to beat up your friends who are currently running these leaders. Well, you are in the right place. Today we will be talking about the 5 most popular leaders: the Mandalorian, Luke Skywalker, Director Krennic, Ezra Bridger and Grief Karga, pretty much the same thing, and Cad Bane. And we didn't just pick these randomly, of course. We went off of popularity. Oops, apologies for that. Off of popularity online, right? The play rate that we're seeing in the testing and the discussions. And Ezra and Grief might not have made it into the top 5, but Boba Fett Lake Country is something that everybody already knows. There's really not much new for that deck. So outside of Boba, we went for the top 5, and that's what we will be talking about today. Now, of course, these numbers change every single day. They change every week. We are still in heavy testing stages, but these are still decks that you need to know about and you need to be ready for if you want to win. Anyways, enough preamble. We can go ahead and jump right in. We are going to start off today by talking about Luke Skywalker. Luke is currently being played most popularly with Command and more notably with Data Vault. And we can take a look at a list here real quick, but I just want to mention that don't take any of the deck lists that I post in this video seriously, mainly because they are just random deck lists I found online. They are not my lists. And on top of that, people are currently changing their lists every single day, nonstop. That's the whole point of theory crafting, of practicing, of training. And so these are just example lists. Take them with a grain of salt. Now, taking a look at an example list for Luke Skywalker, not all of them will be running the same way, right? Not all of them will run the same amount of Bo-Katans, Traskwalker. Some of them might have Rey in the main deck. Most of them aren't running necessarily the new Luke Skywalker Legendary, but the general gist of the deck remains the same. And that is a very similar early curve that we've been seeing in Blue-Green Heroism for a while, especially with Obi-Wan, for example, except it is going to be a little bit less focused on the Force. Some key notable cards here are going to be, of course, Lats Razzie, a very, very powerful rare card. And so make sure that if you're playing against this or any blue-green, you don't drop a 3/3 on turn 1. They can immediately punish you. And the more important thing here is looking at what removal options that they have. And you notice that outside of Lost and Forgotten, the key removal that they are running is either Nothing Left to Fear or Protect the Pod. And both of those are based on their own units. And that is a big weakness. We're not talking about, I mean, Luke doesn't run these because they want to, but it is because it is their only real options. Of course, you have other things like Direct Hit. We see a tree of members here on the side. Some of them do run it in the main, of course. But a lot of the strong removal in these is unit-based. And what that means is that if you do fall behind and you don't have your own units to use it on, you're going to have a rough time. That is something worth noting. Lastly, before we move on to seeing it, how we can beat this, a key card here that's raising in popularity is Bo-Katan's Gauntlet. It's a very interesting card, and you need to be very careful how you play around it, because if they drop it and you don't have an answer right away, their board gets really, really sticky and very hard to deal with. Okay, so what are some of the weaknesses of Luke Skywalker and how can you manipulate them, right? So the first couple are going to be general weaknesses for blue-green in general, and it's going to be a hard time regaining the board. Pretty much every single Vigilance Command deck is going to have a hard time getting the board back when they've lost it. A lot of their units either bring in new units, protect other units, buff other units. Some of your removal uses your own units. So if you don't have units, if your opponent's just deleting them all, you have a very, very hard time clawing your way back into the game. This is a bit less true now on the villainy side with things like Previsla, but in general, this is a weakness of these aspects. Difficulty with upgrades and shields. We saw a lot of new upgrade removal this set, but none of them in these aspects. Aggression still has the strong tools that it had with System Shock, Constable. We saw a few new cunning options this set, and the only new one in green or blue, unfortunately, was Reforge. And while Reforge is a good card, it only works on upgrades on your own units. So yeah, of course, you can use them on Condemn or Stygian Prime, but you cannot use it to deal with your opponent's shields or their upgrades. That's a very heavy weakness. Of course, we still have a very low space presence. We don't have much answers to wide. When I say we, apologies, I mean Luke Skywalker doesn't have many answers to wide boards. They only have Bo-Katan, and that's very, very late. Fairly weak late game compared to villainy, and most of it is proactive instead of reactive. Now, what I mean by that is that if you pay attention to what those late game big dudes are doing, over on the villainy side, every time you play one of them, it's kind of deleting your opponent's stuff, right? When you play a unit, you're defeating your opponent's units. Whereas on the hero side, instead, you're playing a unit and you're just getting more units. Great examples of that are going to be something like Killeram Beck, Queen Amidala, right? And so most of the time you need to be proactive. You need to be the first one to play. And sometimes that is a weakness, especially if you're playing into those villainy decks. You're kind of giving fuel for their Previslas, for their Chimeras. So, I mean, you're not going to win the late game against a blue-green villainy with this deck. Fairly limited direct removal. We spoke quite a bit about that already. And lastly, a fragile leader. Now, sometimes this doesn't matter. But in a deck like this that kind of relies heavily on its leader, most of the time this deck uses Luke Skywalker himself as a finisher. This is quite the weakness. And I know you might say that a 6/7 doesn't seem fragile, but it is a 6/7 on the 7 resource turn. If you think about it, most 6 deploy leaders are 4/7 in stats, and some 5 costs are 3/7 in stats. Now, of course, you might tell me, Dino, a lot of the new leaders don't have those stat lines anymore. But yeah, sure. But we're still comparing Luke Skywalker to other leaders that are currently in the same premier rotation. So if you take Mother Talzin, for example, who is a 3/7, yeah, this is much less power, but it is still the same 7 health. So having an extra 2 turns to come up with a way to defeat that Luke Skywalker in a single hit is rough. You can just flip and have this leader be deleted immediately. And that's why I consider him fairly fragile. Okay, enough about that. Let's talk about some of the cards that are really, really strong against Luke that you could be incorporating into your decks if you want to beat him. So, as we mentioned, very few upgrade removal. So the typical ones are like Chewbacca, Constructed Lightsaber, but honestly, any pilots, any heavy upgrades, whether that's Mastery or Stygian Prime or Condemn, is very, very strong against Luke. They do not have any serious answers to these, and I mean, all they can do is the tree remembers. So if you have these on a 4 cost or higher, tough luck, right? If you have a Constructed Lightsaber on your leader, for example, Luke kind of just has to sit there and wait. Some people might be running aggression upgrade removal out of aspect, but that's still a heavy cost. Next up, we have cards like Tragedy of Plagueis or Governor Shuttle that can instantly delete units, right? Luke Skywalker tends to love going tall instead of wide. You can see this in how they heal their units, they buff their units. So having a way to just instantly delete some of those, and especially these both work on your opponent's leader. So if your Luke Skywalker just flips and is immediately defeated, you're kind of not getting to do what your deck is designed to do. Of course, Single Reactor Ignition, very, very powerful card, and rightfully so. It is extremely devastating against a Luke Skywalker because, again, they have a hard time regaining the board. If Luke answers Single Reactor with a Killeram Beck, okay, they're good. But if they don't, it's going to be very, very hard to just get to claw your way back into the game. Next up, we have Admiral Akbar, one of the new legendaries from Ashes of the Empire. It is a very strong tool against Luke Skywalker in the same vein as Killeram Beck, but it does it much, much sooner. And we saw how, well, we mentioned that Luke is weak to both wide boards and to space. Well, Admiral Akbar does both. Obviously, not every deck is going to be able to run this, but if you're playing something like a Han 4 or a Luke Pilot, Playing this against Luke could be pretty devastating. They're going to wait at least 2 more turns to be able to do Hyperspace Disaster, and most of the time those space decks will have won by then. Next up, we have Shielded Sentinels, most notably the new one, Imperial Armored Commando. Luke has a very, very hard time into this. There is no serious way to break through this. It's most of the time going to absorb 2 hits. And I mean, that's pretty devastating. And in the same vein, of course, other shielded units like Darth Tyrannus, especially if you're able to ambush in, defeat something, and then get the shield. Force in general is a very weak spot for Luke, right? You need to get the board and you need to maintain the board, and there's no deck right now that can fight a Force deck on the ground, especially a villainy Force deck. They just have way too many strong ground-based tools. Okay, that's going to be it for Luke Skywalker. Let's go ahead and check out the next leader. So the next leader we're going to look at is going to be Ezra Bridger or Greef Karga. I'm going to pair these two together because they are essentially doing the same thing in slightly different ways. I know a lot of people are going to yell at me for this, but it's basically the same deck. I'm going to mostly talk about Ezra Bridger because he has been gaining popularity while Greef Karga has been losing popularity. But at the end of the day, pretty much everything I say applies to both of them. So here's an example list of what they are running. And you can immediately see that it is a very low curve, very space centric, right? Hoping to just run under your opponent, defeat them really quickly, usually by your flip turn, so that they cannot use their late game threats. And rightfully so, there have been a lot of new strong late game threats. And the best way to beat a Previsla, Ninth Sister, Chimera spam is to not let your opponent get there. So the more notable things about this list are going to be the fact that there is very, very little ground. It's basically charismatic, and because it's just an insane card. The new Poe Dameron that disables Sentinels is a very key and important card. Rose Tico, you always have to have it in the back of your mind. If your opponent has a unique and a non-unique unit, you might want to defeat the non-unique one first so that Rose can't come in and hit you really hard. Not much in the form of removal, right? They're just running 3 Beguile, and that's mostly going to be used for Sentinels. And lastly, of course, they have the new 3/2 Mini Millennium Falcon that can come in ready and smack for 3 if you need to. They do run aggressive negotiation, so you do need to keep that in mind. And always count how many cards they have in their hand and make sure that the claim into aggressive negotiations isn't enough to defeat you, because we've all lost games like that. And make sure that that's not how you lose a game that you kind of deserve to win. Lastly, the main difference between Ezra and Greef is how Voltron-y Ezra plays, right? We're seeing lists of Ezra Bridger generally spending their flip turn doing Night Sabers into Sudden Ferocity or Double Night Saber, as one of their biggest win cons is getting Ezra to be really, really big. Also worth noting that the main reason I think that Ezra Bridger is becoming more popular than Greef is just because of his leader flip being a turn earlier and having Saboteur. When you are playing a full-on space deck, your leader not being a pilot means that it is very vulnerable on the ground. Most of the time, your opponent will already have a heavy ground presence by the time you can flip. So if you already see that when Greef Karga flips, if your opponent can put a Sentinel down, Greef is kind of screwed. Well, Ezra doesn't have that problem. You can just Voltron him up, put some lightsabers on him, and then immediately ignore all those Sentinels and hit base. And that is something worth noting. It's really nice to have Saboteur when you are relying on a mostly space deck. Okay, so what are some of the key weaknesses of these decks? It is a mostly space deck with ground leader. Even though you have Saboteur as Ezra, it is kind of a weakness. It kind of guarantees that by the time you flip, you're going to be defeated that turn. Hopefully you can get some damage in. Most of your units are fragile, especially versus space decks. It's just the nature of the beast, right? You are playing a very aggressive deck. You don't have much units that have high stats. You are playing things like the Ebon Hawk that have 3 health on turn 2. That's very, very easy to deal with. But they hit very hard. Both of these are very glass cannon decks. It is a weakness. At the end of the day, if your opponent has enough removal, if you aren't able to play some form of wide removal, we'll talk about those when we're looking at the cards, these decks can very quickly fall apart. Pretty heavy reliance on advantage tokens. Duh, that's obvious. Both of these units, both of these leaders generate advantage tokens. but they also play decks that kind of need those tokens. So if your opponent, if you are able to attack into their units with the tokens, or just remove them at the right time, use token upgrade removal if you want to, you can really disrupt their plans. They have extremely minimal reach. It's easy to stabilize against them. What I mean is that if you take a look at what aggro decks in the past used to do, and the best example being Sabine, that kind of terrorized everyone for the first 2 years of this game, you would get your opponent to 20 damage on their base, and for the last 5 to 10, you would rely on things like For a Cause I Believe In, or Wrecker with an energy conversion lab, basically some form of damage from hand. And unfortunately, there isn't any of that right now, at least not in these aspects. So most of the reach that they have is either pumps on their units to make them hit harder on the spot, or ways to have a unit come in ready. But both of those have counterplay involved, right? You can disrupt this play. So it's, I wouldn't call it predictable, but it is something that you can see coming and have a little bit of time to react to. Their chain can be disrupted if you time it well. This is more true for Ezra than it is for Grief. And by that I mean that basically they want to be putting those advantage tokens on the key units. And the most important one of this is going to be the new Yellow Aces Bomber. In a perfect world, they want to constantly give that advantage token and hit really, really hard. They can also have other chains where they buff something up to 3 power, attack your base, give an advantage token to another. If you hit them at the right spot, if you either defeat that unit, or heck, even if you just give them a -2/-2 so they don't hit for 3, you kind of stop their chain in the track. And at that point, they slow down quite heavily, right? So if you are able to disrupt them, you can take a deep breath. You can catch up. And lastly, gotta go fast, right? These are pure aggro decks. They run out of steam fairly quickly, generally by turn 5. So if they haven't defeated you by this, like the 6th resource turn, you probably win the game. So it's okay to play hyper defensive in the beginning and not necessarily do base damage. You just got to deal with their units as efficiently and as quickly as possible. Sometimes it's better to waste cards and just stop the damage coming in. So let's talk about the cards that you could be using to get on top of these decks, right? One of my personal favorites that I think is being a little underplayed right now is going to be the Shuttle ST-149. This is an extraordinary card. It has seen some competitive play, and I mean, rightfully so, but this in the past has only specifically stolen shields or experience, but advantage token is a token upgrade. So you can indeed come in and steal an advantage token with this. It becomes a 4/4, but more importantly, it stops your opponent's chain. And if you are able to, let's say, put this down on turn 2 because you have a Krennic unit, or even turn 3, you can steal the advantage token that is on their bomber, and you just prevented 3 damage by doing that. And now he is a 4/4, so he can defeat that bomber or whatever else is coming in. And heck, when this guy is defeated, you get to steal another advantage token. This is a great tool against these decks. Next up, of course, we have the T6 Shuttle, but more in general, just any Space Sentinels. A lot of their units have Saboteur, especially that new support Saboteur spaceship that they have that is a 4/4, but most of the units don't. And if you are able to place a very carefully timed Sentinel in space, you can really stop all of their damage in their tracks, and at that point, they just fall apart. T6 is just an example here. This is obviously on the heroism side. I personally have started using the B-Wing Rearguard, the new 3/5 Sentinel in Vigilance. There's a lot of options. There's not necessarily a lot of great options. Most of the good Sentinels are on the ground, but every aspect has some form of options for Space Sentinels. And yeah, if you time it right, you just win the game. Next up, we have Hera Syndulla. This card is straight up just designed to outrace space decks, right? As we saw in their list, the only real answer that they have to Hera is Beguile. And if they don't Beguile this, then you start healing so much. By itself, this is going to be causing a delta of 6 every single turn, right? Dealing 3 to them, healing 3 to you. And that's not even accounting for things like your upgrades or aggressive negotiations and ways to just completely swing it. So anytime you are against a space-only deck, you want to consider Hera Syndulla. It will just straight up win you the game. Next up, some very interesting options are the new upgrade removal, the new removal of an upgraded non-leader unit get lost on the heroism side. Since they put advantage tokens on everything, this pretty much defeats everything in their deck. In the same vein, of course, we have direct hit because they are mostly space. This will hit pretty much everything that they have. And while these seem expensive, again, this falls into breaking their chain. And if you do it at the right time, especially on a key unit, like if you do this on their stolen AT hauler, and not only are you defeating 4 to 5 damage, but you're also then getting that hauler yourself, and you can just start snowballing away with the game. In a somewhat similar vein, we have Heroic Purgle. It is ambush. Ambush is basically removal, but the best thing about this is that it hits for 5, and a lot of their key space units have 4 or 5 health. This will defeat them. It will stick around, and it'll deal with more threats. What more could you want? And lastly, Let's Call It War. I think this is one of the absolute best tools against these aggro decks. Most of the time, this will give you a very clean 2-for-1, right? Especially if you're playing a ping leader. If you are able to do this on the bomber and their 3-2 in space, for example, sometimes that will just single-handedly turn the tables into your favor. Now, I do want to give a little bit of an honorable mention here to Condemn. Now, I wouldn't recommend Condemn blindly against this deck because we did see that they are running Constables most of the time. If not, they'd be running System Shocks. You are playing against aggression, right? They have all of the upgrade removal. However, a well-timed Condemn can win you the game. And what I mean by that is we mentioned earlier that a lot of the plan for Ezra Bridger is to Voltron their leader. So you'll see them very often flip and Sudden Ferocity and then put a Knight's Saber or Knight's Blade, whatever it's called, on the leader. At that point, they have a giant leader who is a saboteur and they have no resources left open. If at that point you are able to Condemn Ezra, you prevent so much damage coming in on your base. He's still hitting you for a little bit, right? Because Condemn's only reducing the damage by 6, and in this theoretical situation, they're hitting for 9, so you'd still take 3. But at that point, they are no longer generating the advantage token from the swing. They are only hitting you for 3, and if they do, they're pretty much giving you the initiative. And at that point, you can then trade into Ezra at your convenience. And then they kind of have to start the next turn by playing the upgrade removal. It's a speed bump. It is not a solution. It is a speed bump. And sometimes versus fast cars, you need speed bumps. Anyways, that's going to be it for these leaders. And we can go ahead and jump into the next one. The next leader we'll be looking at is going to be the Mandalorian. Especially the Mandalorian Colossus. It's been getting fairly popular lately as the, I believe, first iteration we've had of kind of hard control on the heroism side. It's a very interesting list. Let's take a look, right? Obviously, we've seen different variations of this coming up. Some of them have more units, some of them have less, but this is the one that I've been seeing more and more often. And I have to say it's a very creative list. We'll talk about it in a moment. It's nice to see hard control on the heroism side, even though most people are not fans of hard control. But this is not the hard control in the way you expect it. It is still trying to remove everything that you play as soon as you play it. But they actually have a win condition, which is having a unit stick and playing aggressive negotiations, right? Mandalorian draws a ton of cards every time you claim initiative. And aggressive negotiations generally hits for a +6 to +8 in their deck. So depending on what they have in play, they'll usually defeat your base in 2 hits. Keep that in mind, very relevant. The rest of it is fairly standard. It's just a bunch of units that come in and either slow you down, such as Sentinels, or units that come in and defeat stuff like Anakin, Hammerhead, Zeb Orrelios, Mandalorian. I'm not convinced about Bendu. I know this list that I found is running him. I don't think that's the right play, but sometimes you just need big stuff. Anyways, there's not much else notable here. It's just a bunch of cards. I did see some versions running the new Reckless Sacrifice and dropping a low-cost villainy card. It's cute, right? You can trigger your Anakin for a -6/-6 that way, and that is a somewhat efficient removal in a deck that doesn't have a lot of options to deal with 5 health units, so something worth noting. So, what are the key weaknesses of this deck? The biggest one is going to be minimal board presence. Obviously, their win condition is having something stick and then using aggressive negotiations, but they don't generally have much board, which means that the few units that they do play, you can defeat. And if you are playing a deck that has enough removal, most of the time when you are playing against hard control, you would kind of expect to resource your removal. Against this deck, you shouldn't. Against this deck, you have to keep your removal and get rid of their key cards at the right time. They don't have any answers to wide boards, especially early. We did see Nebula Ignition and Single Reactor Ignition, but those are at 9 and 10 resources respectively. That's not reasonable against wide boards. Let's call it War only does so much. So if you are able to, let's say, drop two 4 health units by turn 2, one of them is going to stick. One of them is going to deal some damage. So they are going to bleed some damage throughout the game. And generally, that's enough for you to win the game. I just want to mention though, that actually comes in anytime I talk about wide boards, and especially against decks like this. Apologies. A mistake that I see players make is trying to play on curve. And playing on curve against decks like this is a big mistake. If you are just playing a 2-drop into a 3-drop into a 4-drop, they are expecting this. They have their answers ready for this. If instead, on the 4 resource turn, instead of dropping a 4-drop, you drop 2 2-drops, they can now not deal with both of them. In a world where, let's say they are both 2/4s, right? Let's say you are playing Obi-Wan or Luke Skywalker. Let's say you drop a Mina Bonteri and a Yaddle. There is no card in their deck that can deal with both of those at the same time. That way you guarantee some damage going in. And then on the next turn, they need to either deal with the 2-drop that you just attacked with, or deal with whatever you just put into play. This applies even more so on your leader flip turn, because your leader flip turn, naturally you are going to be playing somewhere around 2 to 3 units anyways. So having a way to just incrementally make your board stickier, harder to deal with, especially against a deck who does not have access to Single Reactor on 8, is crucial. Okay, struggles if unable to claim initiative. I think this is fairly straightforward. The entire deck revolves around having initiative. They need to get it every single turn. So sometimes just not attacking and claiming initiative can ruin them much more, especially right before their flip turn, right? On the 6 resource turn, if at the end of the 5 resource turn you claim the initiative, their flip now does not draw them a card. And if they do flip, claiming does not draw them a card, because they would need to claim and then attack. So you're kind of delaying their draw by a significant amount, and it's okay to lose 2 damage to do this. Now, of course, some good Mandalorian players won't let you do that, but sometimes you can manipulate the state for you to do that. It's doable, especially if you are playing a deck that has a lot of removal and you can deal with their stuff. It's okay to just be like, okay, I'll claim. What do you have for me? And at that point, if they pass, you can just keep claiming. And somebody needs to break that stalemate, and it's up to you to determine if you have enough answers to their threats. Okay, inefficient removal. Very expensive board wipes. We spoke about the board wipes. We're not going to repeat that, but inefficient removal is important to note. On the villainy side, hard control has been good because it is efficient. They have a lot of cards that just instantly point and delete. On the heroism side, they do not have that. They need to rely on just dealing a little bit of damage here, a little bit of damage there. When you play against this deck, you'll notice that sometimes they'll just play that, let's call it war, leave one of your units at 2 health, and then hopefully drop a Zeb Aurelius next turn to finish it off. They're trying to do the best that they can with the tools that they have, but the tools are not great. So learn what those tools are. Learn exactly the breakpoint of damage that they are doing. Is it 3? Is it 4? And play units that are dodging that. Play in a way that you maximize your damage. If you have a 2 units, one of them that would be potentially vulnerable to their removal, make sure you attack with that one first so they cannot efficiently remove the second one, and then you get that hit in anyways. Leaders are hard to deal with, and rightfully so. We don't have any easy way to defeat leaders. Most of the time you kind of have to rely on stuff like, I don't know, Braving Power or just attacking into them, Governor's Shuttle. All of these cards are in villainy. On the heroism side, there is no clean way to deal with a leader. You can reckless sacrifice into Anakin, I guess, but most of the time you're going to have to attack into it multiple times, hopefully put some sentinels in front of them, and against some leaders that just doesn't work. And lastly, predictable and very disruptible finisher, right? This unlike hard control in the past, they cannot mill you out. They cannot outvalue you. They need to get that aggressive negotiation hit in. And if you are able to predict it and disrupt it in the right way, whether that is through your own removal, through sentinels, through ways to remove aggressive negotiations, or just not let them draw, you can kind of completely disrupt their game plan. And lastly, weak leader flip. Very, very weak leader flip. This leader does nothing, especially in this type of deck. The support keyword is more or less irrelevant. They don't have something to attack with. So this is just a 4/6 that will sometimes draw them a card on attack. Most of the time, you can just ignore this leader. It's a big, big weakness. Okay, so let's talk about the cards that are strong against this. And the most important one is going to be Rey. As we saw, even they are sometimes running Rey out of aspect, but they are paying 10 for it. This type of deck, any deck that relies on just pointing kick removal, cannot deal with threats like Rey. Generally speaking, if you drop a Rey, they need to put sentinels in front of it. They need to play that Bendu. They need to maybe play a Bo-Katan and hope that hopefully they can attack with it, or they have to waste one of their precious aggressive negotiations to attack into Rey. And so I think this is one of those cards that if you play it against this deck, they defeat it, and then you play a second one, they're just going to pick up their deck and go next. It's just the reality of it. Next up, we have Jam Communications. Generally, making them discard cards is not great when they have 20 cards in their hand, but Jam Communications not only gives you information on their hand of which removal they currently have that you can play around, but also lets you get rid of the key ones for the current turn, right? If you start your turn with Jam Comms and you see that, hey, they have two options, but only one of them deals with what I have right now, you can remove that. But more importantly, you can also remove their aggressive negotiations. You kind of take away their entire win condition. Seasoned Fleet Admiral is a fantastic card against this deck. This is a 1/4 that's just going to keep growing every single turn because your opponent is always going to be drawing more cards during the action phase. I don't think there's much more to say about this. It'll just keep growing and growing and growing, and it's going to be a 2 cost that they're going to need to waste precious removal for. The Darksaber, one of my absolute favorite cards from this set. Turning anything into a leader is good. Yes, sometimes they will run upgrade removal, and of course, if they hit this with their upgrade removal, it's unfortunate. But in the off chance that they do not find their upgrade removal, or you put it on the right time, we mentioned at length how weak this deck is to leaders, and having a second leader to deal with is rough. It is very rough. I mean, they better hope that they draw their constables at the right time. It's going to be more relevant in a game 1 situation than a game 2 or 3, but it is still a nice way to steal a win. And next up, we have Yellow Ace's Bomber, but I think this is more here as a placeholder for support in general. And what I mean by that is support is an amazing keyword against the Mandalorian. But think about it this way. On turn 2, you start by dropping the Yellow Ace's Bomber or another support unit. You just attack. Now they need to spend a card to deal with one of your units. Maybe both. Doesn't matter. You're now out of resources. You're out of attacks. You get to claim. They did not draw a card. Next turn, let's say you drop another support card. Attack again. They need to deal with your stuff. You claim again. And the chain just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. And you full on deny their entire draw power. The entire premise of their deck falls apart. Now, is this easy to do? Not necessarily. There's not too many decks that run that many supports, but enough. There are some decks that can afford to pull it off. And of course, we have direct damage like Corellian Hounds or Planetary Bombardment that could be very, very strong against decks like this, especially if they spend their entire turn doing a very expensive board wipe like a 10 cost single reactor ignition. You can follow it up with things like this to deal a massive amount of damage on their base and make them regret spending all of their resources in a single turn. Anyways, that's going to be it for Mandalorian. We can move on to the next leader. Our penultimate leader today is going to be Director Krennic. One of the few, actually, I think the only leader not from Ashes of the Empire on this list today. And boy, he's had quite the resurgence. While he didn't do much at all during a lawless time, it kind of seems like it is his time to shine here. And let's take a look at the list real quick here. Again, grain of salt. Don't take this one for one. But there are some very important cards to note here. What I believe is the most important is going to be Enoch. Enoch alone is what sets Krennic apart from every other blue-green villainy deck. And the reason for that is that you get to put Enoch in play on turn 2 almost 100% of the time. Whether it's because you have Director Krennic or you played something else like Android and sacrificed it, you get to play that Enoch on turn 2. And the odds of your opponent defeating a 5 health unit on turn 2 are very, very low. Sure, it can get Beguiled. It can get some other form of bounce, or I don't think there's much removal that can deal with this on turn 2. Sure, maybe they can do no disintegrations into attack it. But I think you're happy if your opponent is playing defense like that, because a deck like this wants to get their big dudes out as fast as possible. And if that Enoch does not get defeated on turn 2, you get to then sacrifice it yourself with Krennic, and then on turn 3 you get to drop any of your big dudes, whether that is Previsla or Skywalker. Some lists are running Ravager, whatever you want, right? Being able to play something that big, that fast, versus some decks, they just cannot do anything at all. How devastating would it be that on turn 3 your opponent plays a Previsla and completely wipes your board and generates 2 to 3 tokens? It's impossible to come back from that. That's 12/12 worth of stats when you have nothing left in play. You just outright lose the game. But there's also a lot of other cards that interact very, very well. Most notably Casca Reeves, right? When you play her, if you have had another unit get defeated, you get to spawn a token and then she becomes a sentinel. The fact that you are defeating your own units means that you're going to be always able to trigger this. You have a lot of other great cards that you don't mind necessarily sacrificing, things like Android. Some of them are running the little Rick the Tor Technician that you can sacrifice to heal your base for 2. This is just a very nice, strong, synergistic, cohesive deck that has started to gain popularity as the primo blue-green villainy deck at the moment. Now, we are also seeing some Aura Data Vault see play, and it's almost the same thing. So anything that I mention as a weakness or as a card that you can play against this, you could use against Aura DV as well. Obviously, taking into account that some of the stuff that relies on credits or sacrificed units don't matter. Anyways, let's go ahead and see what you can use against Director Krennic. Now, of course, we are talking about blue-green again. Whether that's heroism or villainy doesn't matter. They share a lot of weaknesses, and the biggest one is going to be, again, difficulty with upgrades and shields. They have no way to remove those upgrades and shields other than directly removing the unit. So, yeah, some cards will just outright be very hard to deal with. They have a very weak early game. Most of the time, they are playing a unit, sacrificing it themselves, playing another unit, sacrificing it themselves. So that's giving you 1 to 3 turns to establish a board before they actually play something. Versus some decks, that's enough. That's enough time to just steal the game. They have no answers to whiteboards whatsoever. You are playing blue-green. You do not have single reactor ignition. The only way you can realistically deal with a whiteboard is Previsla, and you kind of have to cheat him out very aggressively, very quickly if you want to be able to deal with those whiteboards. This deck runs a lot of situational cards, which makes sometimes late game top decking very, very tough. Now, I mentioned this because it's something worth noting, is that a lot of the time when you look at your opponent in the late game scenario and they draw their 2 cards, you're like, oh, he probably just drew his Devastator and his Avenger. It's very rough. But this deck runs so many small drops that they need things like Android, late game Enoch. There's just a lot of tools that are there to get this deck up and running, to start the engine, that are pretty much maybe not dead cards, but very slow cards in the late game. So if you find a way to disrupt their few good cards, we'll talk about that later when we talk about the cards themselves that you can be playing, you could kind of tear this deck apart. It is a very one-trick bony. Hand hate or hard removal can disrupt them very significantly. Basically, think about the situation that I mentioned where they play an Enoch, sacrifice it, play something big. If they do that and you have an immediate answer to it through something like a no glory or a no disintegrations or something like that, they just wasted their entire first 3 to 4 turns to do one big play that you immediately dealt with. So if you have a way to predict and disrupt their first big play, it's the most important one, they fall behind. At that point, you can start kind of dealing with the stuff that they put down one at a time. And by the time they are able to flip, they have nothing left. So they kind of have to plot out a first light in order to use Krennic's ability. And of course, we mentioned it multiple times, but it has to be mentioned. This is not a weakness. This is something to be mindful of. You have to be very, very careful of Enoch. It can completely run away with the game. If you have a way to stall it, you have to do it. Okay, so what are some of the cards that are good against this? And I'm going to repeat myself here by talking about Rey. And the same way that Rey is very, very tough to deal with for the Mandalorian, it is equally tough to deal with as Krennic, with the somewhat slightly easier time due to access to craving power. Your opponent can, I guess, have a unit in play that they can craving power and defeat this. But look, the big threats that they usually play, Previsla, Traskwalker, and Chimera, all have 6 or less power, which means craving power alone won't do it. So it would require multiple resources to take one down. Same as Luke, you have the same weakness to upgrades, whether that is offensive upgrades or defensive upgrades. Any pilots, any lightsabers, any Stygian primes or condemns, they are semi-permanent. Your opponent needs to play a tree of members on your unit. If it's on your leader, tough shit. They have a hard time dealing with it. Arvel Skeen. Now, a card that you might not have heard of for a few months because credit decks didn't seem relevant in Ashes of the Empire. Well, I don't think there's much to say about this. It is a very strong card. It's not just Arvel, right? That we have Lieutenant Gorn in yellow. We have some other options as well, but those are the two key ones. If they defeat their own unit, they make a credit, and then you play this to get rid of that credit. It's as if they did nothing. They just threw a card into the discard pile. And if they are throwing cards into the discard pile while you are developing your board, that's rough. The main weakness to Arvel Skeen is that they can answer it with a Lat Razzie. So in a perfect world, try to do it when they don't have 3 resources up, I guess. Hand disruption through either Ninth Sister, Hold for Questioning, or Jam Communications, anything that you want. As we mentioned, this is a very combo-centric deck. They have a lot of small tools that work together, build up an engine to then throw a big dude at you. If you can strategically snipe either the combo pieces they need, or more realistically, their big dudes, which they have a very limited amount of, you can make the deck do nothing at all. So many times I've seen a Director Krennic flip and be Hold for Questioning, and then you make them discard their Traskwalker or their Previsla or whatever have you. And at that point, they end up spending their entire turn putting down an Antdroid and passing. That's rough. Stuff in space, most notably Stolen AT Hauler, Squadron Wingman, or generally stuff that has 4 to 5 health, if not more, is very, very tough to deal with. I guess the ones that cost 3 or less, like Stolen AT Hauler, you can tree your members. But when you have to start spending heavy cards like Direct Hit or No Glory to deal with those big ships, at some point you're going to run out, and at some point you might not draw them. You also don't have a lot of room for direct removal in a deck like Krennic because you have to dedicate so much slots to your early engine pieces. So generally space is a weakness, right? Unlike heroism side, you don't have good, efficient sentinels in space. On the villainy side, so ships like this, like the new Aces Bomber, are generally fast enough, strong enough, and sturdy enough to just break down Krennic before he can put his big units in play. And lastly, in the same vein as the other upgrades, it's worth mentioning Shadow of Stygian Prime specifically. Yeah, they can play Reforge if they want, and some of them might actually have that in their sideboard, but Shadow of Stygian Prime will essentially eradicate one of their units permanently, and the only way for them to remove it, if it's a unique unit, is to play a second one. Now imagine if they play a Chimera and you place that Shadow of Stygian Prime on it, that Chimera, instead of healing them for 2 every turn, is going to deal 2 damage to their base every turn. More importantly, you can do this on something like a Traskwalker, which is not a unique unit. So if they do want to use the Traskwalker, they need to defeat it themselves. That's not happening. And that's going to be it for Krennic. Now, I mentioned it, but again, most of this applies to other blue-green villainy decks, and I want to emphasize that because blue-green villainy is here, and it is here to stay. Today, the flavor of the month might be Krennic. Tomorrow, it might be Aura Singh. Who knows? Next week, it might be some other nonsense that I can't even think about right now. Most of this stuff still applies, maybe not Arvel Skeen, but yeah, keep it in mind. It is an archetype you're going to see a lot of. We have a lot of strong new vigilance villainy late game. People like playing with that stuff. Okay, that's going to be it for Director Krennic. We can move on to the next one, and this is what a lot of people were waiting for, and that is going to be Cad Bane. Cad Bane has been public enemy number one ever since we got all of the cards revealed, and it deserves that spot. It is a very dominant deck. I want to get ahead of it and say it is not overpowered by any means, but it is a deck that is frustrating to play against, and understandably so, right? The ping that the Cad Bane is able to do to your units every single turn kind of skews the math in Cad Bane's favor pretty significantly, right? It makes it so their 3/3s can defeat your 2/4s and survive. Their 2/3s can fight toe-to-toe with your 3/3s. It makes it so they can immediately injure stuff and get rid of it with stuff like Tie Dagger Vanguard. Some of them are running Charge with Murder if they absolutely want to, but basically all of your units are just worse than they usually are. And that is a big downside. And that combined with the fact that red-blue villainy got the best endgame suite of cards, most specifically these three, Chimera, Sister, and Vizsla, together make the most oppressive late game combo. Cad Bane is a mainstay. It is here to stay. You need to learn how to deal with it. Now, the only other cards worth mentioning here are going to be, first of all, the Cyborg Mech, the card that is by itself pretty mediocre, but in Cad Bane it becomes disgusting. It is essentially reads 6 cost, defeat your opponent's leader. Because when you flip your leader, Cad Bane's going to ping it once, and then drop the Cyborg Mech, and most leaders will be defeated by that. If you have 7 health instead, he'll ping it, deploy, attack, ping, and then Cyborg Mech. Yeah, you'll get 1 swing out of your leader, but your leader's gone, and they deploy, and they develop their board at the same time. That's pretty rough. You need to keep the Cyborg Mech in mind, and there are ways to play around this. We'll talk about that in a bit. Lastly, I want to mention Cyril Karn, a card that has seen extremely little play up until now, even though it's not new. In this deck, it is very frustrating to play against, especially if they start with the initiative. They will almost guarantee trigger this based on what they have in their hand, right? It's not a very hard disclosed condition to have double red and 1 black. And if they do have the initiative and are able to pull this off on their first action on turn 2, you are either going to be losing your first turn play or semi-free, or you're going to be discarding a card. And while a lot of the time that might not seem bad, the fact that 9th Sister is now a card and most decks don't have inherent draw power means that every single card that you're discarding at the beginning of a game is going to snowball into a much bigger disadvantage later on when the 9th Sister back-to-back are coming down. This list for some reason doesn't have BT1, but I do also want to mention it that a lot of the lists are currently running BT1, and in a similar vein to Cyril Karn, it is very frustrating to play against because on turn 1 they can play the BT1, then ping your unit, and then on turn 2 ping it again, BT1 attacks, defeats it. There's just so many powerful plays you can do. Of course, that's a bit more risky and probably why this list that I found isn't running him, because half of the deck is blue. So if you attack and just mill out your Chimera, that's unfortunate. Okay, so what are the weaknesses for Cad Bane? Believe me, as strong as he is, there are weaknesses. So the first one is going to be the Cad Bane needs to stretch thin to answer a wide meta that is targeting him. And what I mean by that is that everybody knows that Cad Bane is the current best deck. And so everybody is going to be fighting to beat Cad Bane, and they're all going to do it in a different way. Some people will do it through upgrades. Some people will do it through attrition. Some people will do it through something else. And when everybody's targeting you in a different way, it's very hard to have your deck stretched out so thin to have ways to deal with each of them. yeah, okay, you need some upgrade removal to deal with this guy. But then this other guy that you go against next turn isn't running upgrades. Instead, he's running, I don't know, hand disruption. Okay, maybe you'll add some cards in your deck to fight off against hand. And then this third guy is doing something else. And because everyone is targeting you, it's going to mean that your deck is going to be stretched to its limits. And it's going to be a deck building weakness. Not every Cad Bane list is going to be severely different, trying to fight off against something else that's trying to fight itself. I hope that made sense. Next up, we have strong but predictable. Removal can be disrupted. And I mentioned this a little bit with the Cyborg mech, but it's true for all of it. Every single play that Cad Bane does is extremely predictable because while his removal is strong, it is, what's the word I'm looking for? It's foreshadowed, right? It is, your opponent's kind of telegraphed. It is telegraphed. Your opponent is telling you, hey, I am about to do this. Most notably, if they're going to just ping everything down to 1 and then drop an IG 2000. If they take one of your units down to 1 health and then just claim, they're probably about to drop a Justifier. You know what I mean? So it is semi-predictable, and if you have a way to disrupt this, you can mess with their turns. Let's give an example here. They pinged your unit down to 1 health on the 4 resource turn, and then just claim the initiative. That means they're going to probably play Justifier on the next turn. Well, if you then immediately put an upgrade on that unit, or use something to heal that unit, that Justifier in their hand now does absolutely nothing. You predicted them, you played around it, and at that point, they kind of need to have found a separate answer for the same unit, or they're going to fall behind. Needs to play reactive. This is the complete opposite of what we said for Luke Skywalker earlier in this video. If you look at all of the cards that they are playing in this list, outside of the 2-drops, every single card does something when played, generally dealing damage or defeating something. And for them to do that, you kind of need stuff in play. I know that sounds strange, but what I mean by that is you can kind of force them to play first, which is ironically very similar to how you used to play against the old Cad Bane, right? He wants you to have units so you can ping them. And especially in the late game, if you are, let's say, playing that Luke Skywalker deck against Cad Bane in the late game, don't be the one to just show your cards first. Just pass. Tell them to play something. If they just keep passing, you guys are just going to keep both passing until something happens. I don't know if Cad Bane comes out ahead in that situation, right? He is not playing green. He does not have Trask Walker. You can usually outvalue them just through having more cards. There's no way they're going to drop a Chimera or a Previsla or just on an empty board. Even Ninth Sister doesn't feel great on an empty board. It'll still go 2 for 1. Don't get me wrong. It's good. But they need to play reactive. So if you don't necessarily give them the tools to be reactive, if you force them to play first, it could definitely come out in your favor. Limited ride removal, especially early. The only way for them to deal with a wide board early on is either Let's Call It War or IG 2000. And look, those are strong tools, but a lot of the time it's just not enough, or it can be played around. Another weakness that I didn't write here, but we'll talk about in the cards, is the fact that their ping doesn't hit 1 health units. And so much of their deck is actually dedicated to dealing that last point of damage that it kind of, what's the word? It kind of like dilutes it, right? It makes it so half of your deck is being used as an answer to a problem that you've created yourself. It's still a strong deck. It is still by far what seems to be the strongest deck out there. But again, they have a lot of situational niche cards that you can play around. And lastly, of course, burns bright but runs out of steam in the late game. I know this sounds insane to say when I mentioned that they have Chimera, Sister, and Previsla, as these are the best late game cards, but they are limited. There's only 9 of them. That's it. Sure, if you want to count Cyborg Mech, you can say 12. That is a lot. But if you are playing other blue-green decks, if you are playing other blue-red decks, you just might have more stuff than them. You might be able to make them discard some of those cards. You can run them out of threats. And if you run them out of threats, there are other little pinging units, their IG 2000s, their little Warrior Clan Ordos, they're not going to do much to you. So just plan for the specifically the 9 big units, big legendaries that they have. And if you can either defeat them all or discard them all, you can actually outlive and out-attrition a Cad Bane. That's kind of why the Mandalorian deck has gotten popular lately, is because you can out-attrition Cad Bane. Okay, so some cards that are really, really strong against Cad Bane. I know that this is kind of what you guys are here for, and I think one of the strongest ones is going to be Grogu. There is no way for them to one-shot Grogu outside of direct hard removal, such as Tree Remembers, Lost and Forgotten, etc. And usually when you spend that on a 3 cost, it feels bad. Maybe not Tree Remembers, but you get the idea. They cannot ping this, but more importantly, they cannot ping much of your units, because as soon as this comes down, you get to turn the ping back onto them. This completely uses their own leader against them and wins you the game. I think this is a card that needs to be in every single heroic deck going into the Galactics, going into set 8. If it's not in your main deck, it should be into your side deck, because it is so good against Cad Bane. In a slightly different avenue, we have Cassian Andor here that can pretty much nullify any damage that's 2 or less. This is an unpingable card, and in a deck that runs almost exclusively ping effects, this is really good. Now, I don't think there's a lot of decks that can abuse this, but some that can really get the advantage over Cad. If you're playing something like Obi-Wan, if you're playing something like Leia, you can give this an experience token. It's just going to be a guaranteed bit of damage that's going to come in every single turn, and your opponent needs to, again, waste a heavy removal on this. That does not feel great. Lastly, what am I saying? Next up, we have 1 health units. We mentioned it a little bit, but things like Lippy Lookout, Shin Hati's Fiend Fighter, that new red cost, that new red 2 cost 3/1. There's a lot of 1 health units running around, and some of them are really, really good, like these 2. And Cad Bane can't really do much against them, especially the shielded ones like Lippy Lookout. You can kind of say the same thing for Lats Razzie. I guess if you put a shield on it, you can't really ping it off. There's a lot of great ways to create units that are impossible for Cad Bane to deal with. In a very similar vein, you can also use your units to, let's say, ambush and leave them with 1 health, and then they kind of have to use a secondary resource to get rid of it. My personal favorite play is going to be with Tyrannus, right? You get to ambush into some of their 2/4s, let's say their PT1, and defeat it, keep the 1 health, keep the shield. Now they need to find a way to break the shield, then defeat Tyrannus. That's pretty rough. Grit units, like the new Cobb Vanth, I wouldn't specifically say play the new Cobb Vanth. I think it's a fine card. I just have this here as a placeholder for Grit in general. I don't know if Cobb Vanth himself is worth it, because you're giving a shield, and Cad Bane pretty much makes shields non-existent, but you get the gist of it. Grit units in general are very, very strong against Cad Bane. They will be in a perfect world just pinging your units down to 1 and then finishing them off with a Justifier or what have you. So if your units are getting stronger by that, why not? There are some upgrades that actually give your units grit. There are some cards that let you attack with a unit pretending it has grit. They have not seen any play so far, but maybe you want to play those now because of Cad Bane. Next up, we have Fennec Shand here, just again as a placeholder for ambush units that can break through shields. And the reason for that is going to be the Armored Commando. The Armored Commando is going to be Cad Bane's premier tool to fight off against ground-based strategies, right? Whether that's Fennec Shand that you're running, or the Sabine ambush unit, or Talzin's Assassin, what have you, you need a way to be able to defeat that Armored Commando, because if you have to attack into that twice, I can guarantee you've lost the game. At that point, you've given them so much time and so much free damage that they're going to overwhelm you with their late game. So you need a way to answer that Sentinel, and just in general, their Sentinels on the ground, whether that's Marok, the Armored Commando, or sometimes Koska Reeves. If you cannot plan around those, you'll just lose the game. Finally, we mentioned Taskmaster earlier, and I think this is a very big weakness for Cad Bane, because Cad Bane runs out of cards. What I mean by that is they run out of threats. Their threats are finite, and so every time you play a Taskmaster, not only are you potentially getting one of your threats back, but now they also need to waste one of their removals on getting rid of this. And there's not too many of their removals that can deal with this. There's No Glory and Lost and Forgotten. I guess Chimera, but hopefully you play smart and don't allow that to defeat this very easily. In a world where you play this and get something like your own Chimera or your Kelrang Beck back, you're just going to have more overall threats in your deck than they will, and you'll out-attrition them. And lastly, my personal favorite way to deal with Cad Bane is hand hate. Again, we mentioned over and over, they need to rely on those late game threats. And so if you can remove them from their hand before they come in, whether that is targeted stuff like Hold for Questioning or just general discard like Ninth Sister, heck, even Jam Communications or Bazine, or not Bazine, what am I saying? Gorindan, right? There's so many ways to disrupt your opponent nowadays that I believe hand hate right now is one of the biggest ways to fight off Cad Bane. And ironically, that's why Cad Bane Yellow is really, really strong into Cad Bane Blue, because they have so much hand hate. Okay, and that's going to be it. Hopefully with all this, you guys will be able to defeat all the Cad Banes that you see out there. Now, before I leave you guys though, I do want to mention one last card today, and I think this might be just a me thing. It might be me being an idiot. I believe that this is a card that should be in a consideration in every single deck, and that's going to be Rider Azadi. With the importance of pivotal key cards in people's decks nowadays, with really, really strong board flip cards like Previsla, like Single Reactor Ignition, most decks seem to have one or two cards that completely stop them in their track. And if you are playing Rider Azadi and you know exactly what card would mess you up, you can prevent them from messing you up. I would not go forward with any Vigilance deck nowadays without having this in either my side or my main, because a well-timed Rider Azadi, if your opponent just claims on the 7 resource turn, you know they are about to do a Single Reactor Ignition. If you play this and call SRI, you win the game. If your opponent just pinged your Anakin down to 6 health, you know they're about to Previsla. Just drop this, call Previsla. Watch them squirm, watch them, hey, maybe watch them cry. Who knows? Whatever you're into. But you get the idea. With the importance of some powerful, unique cards that I wouldn't say hasn't been the case before, but generally we've had very few outlier cards in the past, whereas now it kind of seems to be the cornerstone of the meta is singular powerful cards. Rider Azadi might be much better than people are giving him credit for. And with that, folks, that's going to be it for today's Break the Meta. I hope you guys really enjoyed this. If you want to see more of this, or if you want to see a bit more of a deeper dive, please let me know on what leader. It would be my absolute pleasure. As always, I would highly appreciate it if you guys if you guys subscribe to the channel, left a like, left a comment. It helps me out so much. It doesn't cost you anything. And on that note, as always, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys next time.